Hello, Caviar Dreamers.
Hi, Caviar Dreamers. We have a gift for the holidays.
Oh, it's sexy time.
It's sexy time for the holidays. We have a sex therapist coming up. I call her Dr. Cayte Communicate. C-A-Y-T-E. We talk a lot of things about sex. She counsels couples. She counsels individuals. Sex trauma, porn literacy, just amazing things. Everything about sexual health. She's pretty unbelievable.
And I think you're very sex positive.
I'm very sex positive. I am very free with my sexuality. I grew up, as my mother says, we're very European.
Yeah.
We're not repressed people.
I grew up in England, so again,
you're very European.
Very sexually liberal, very sexually free. After children, probably not as sexually free as I would like to be. Just fucking exhausted, but I'm gonna ask Cayte about that, because I think that's something that a lot of people experience.
Yes, exactly. And I think listen, I think a lot of people have a lot of shame around sex for different reasons, because of trauma, upbringing, religious reasons.
The messaging around sex is all wrong
against women. Yeah, I think it's very bad. So I'm so excited to have her on.
Hi, Cayte.
Hi, Cayte. Cayte, I am so excited that you are on today. We have an amazing sex therapist.
Right, you're ready for sexy time.
Ready, just every aspect of sexual freedom, sexual issues. We're going to talk about porn literacy. You are like a sex therapist guru across all lines. But you have some good news for us. You said you have a gift for our listeners.
Yes, I'm very excited. WeVibe is an extraordinary sex toy company. They make just the best quality sex toys. And I have, for one of your lucky listeners, a WeVibe Chorus, which is actually, it's a remote control dual stimulation couples vibrator. So you can use it in the same room, you can use it across the house, one of you can go to work and have a little fun, across the country for long distance relationships. It is such an incredible product. I'm so excited to bring it to one of your listeners.
Oh, that is so nice. I just want you to know, Cayte, Joe and I have had a WeVibe for a very long time, which is right when it came out, which I think is very funny, because we went to a sex toy store with, of course, one of my good friends, Polly, who's here from Oklahoma. And she had never bought a sex toy, and we're in the store together, and she wants to go in. And I said, Joe, should we get this WeVibe? And he and I are getting it. And Polly is being a little cheap, so she doesn't want to get the remote control one. Okay, so she was being chintzy, because the WeVibe, we got the one, the remote control is an extra $40, whatever it was, and she got the one with the little battery. And Bella obviously likes the WeVibe too.
Mommy, stop talking about your sex life.
I know. I'm going to hold Bella 1 second, because we.
Oh, I need to see Bella.
Bella's very cute, but she might be sexually repressed. The poor
she needs a little sex therapy. She needs to open.
I know, Bella. Poor Bella has to stay in the room when her parents have sex, and she just covers her up.
Bella needs a little cuddling.
Yes, Bella just needs cuddling. I think that's what it is. So, Cayte, in all seriousness, how did you decide to focus? Because I know you were doing couples counseling. You were in all areas of counseling. What made you focus on sex therapy?
When I was a little baby therapist back in 2004, I was primarily actually focusing on eating disorders.
Oh, okay.
The more I worked with women, primarily women with eating disorders, the more I realized that there was really a lot of crossover between eating disorders, sexual trauma, sexual repression. We're talking about a little shame, just kind of not really being able to be in their body with any sort of comfort. So it just kind of naturally started to go from there. And I've always been a person who's just had an easy time talking about sex. I mean, back to high school. I mean, I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, so, the conversations were necessary and maybe a little repressed. But, I just remember always being the person who could talk about it, ask questions, had no shame. Which I don't know where that came from, because, like Irish, Italian, Spanish, throw a little Catholic in there on sexual repression. But, so as I was kind of I don't want to say giving permission to my clients, but maybe kind of creating a space for my clients to talk about sex, I really started to understand how their need for a lack of shame really contributed a lot to the healing from the trauma that they were experiencing. So, as any good academic will do, if they kind of dive deep into an area, they decide, kind of to go full hog. And I decided about a year and a half, 2 years ago to go back and get my PhD in clinical sexology so that I could maybe teach and really work on expanding sex education in this country, which is horrid, by the way. It's such a paltry system that we have so far. We're getting better, but we have a long way to go. So that's kind of where it really came from. It was just from an area of wanting to help people really be able to embody their sexuality again. As we know from the last few years in the Me Too movement, so many women have some element of sexual trauma, of just being made to feel uncomfortable around their sexuality, about being made to feel uncomfortable around men in their bodies. So I just want to help people really embody their skin and their sexuality, and really come to a place of understanding about it.
I think it's so important because I never had an issue. I was very sexually free my whole life. I was more repressed as I got older, but I definitely feel like as a young girl in high school, I was having sex. My mom knows. She listens to the podcast.
Me too. I wrote it all in my book.
I was always like, I never wanted to call it the walk of shame. To me, it's the stride of pride.
Yes.
But women are always, I was always made to feel like it was a service to the guy. You're servicing a guy's sexual needs. I think it's so important that sex education in schools, especially, like, women have needs. Women need to enjoy themselves. It was always about giving a guy a hand job, giving a guy a blowjob, having sex with a guy. Not like, what's happening for me?
Yes.
Very transactional.
Giving them your virginity, which that's a whole other podcast. I think we could talk about what shenanigans the whole virginity thing is. But you're right. I mean, it's all about, we have the only organ, the clitoris, that is specifically designed for pleasure, but no one talks about it. No one, we are only now, I think, starting to really normalize masturbation. And I have a funny story, which I hope my daughter never listens to this because she'll be mortified. So she was kind of like hanging out in my bedroom, and she's laying on the floor behind me while I'm doing my makeup or something. And she turns around and she says, "Mom, what's that purple thing on the ground?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's probably my vibrator." And she looks at me like, what? And I was like, "Listen, sweetie," she's 12 years old. So I said, "This is something that you really need to understand. First of all, like, a lot of women have them." And we kind of had the conversation. It was such a natural conversation from there, but I think we don't really normalize masturbation. And how are we supposed to know what we like and
yes,
what we want
I agree.
to understand if we don't know what we like? And so many women are afraid to look at themselves, to touch themselves, to understand what makes them feel good. And I think it's just an old holdover from the puritanical kind of worldview about sexuality.
I just want to digress 1 second. When my first episode on Housewives, we spoke about masturbation. I talked about pop puss, this spray. Every woman at the table, besides Danielle, who never didn't admit to ever masturbating. Teresa, Melissa, everybody who was on my show at the time, Dolores even, like, they didn't admit to any of that. Oh, we don't. I was like, cut me a break. Every one of you women are lying. It's such nonsense. Of course, they've all changed their tune now, years later, after I forced it out of them. But it was very crazy to me that everybody was so repressed about it. Wow. And I just couldn't believe this uptightness. And it's unfortunate, but women are made to feel this way. And I have been slut shamed on my show because of my sexuality, because I've slept with men. I did have an affair. They forgive drunk driving before they forgive an affair. You could kill somebody. Yep. And I feel there's such negativity around sex and women. And I love that you're in the business of trying to fix this and work with people, because it's insane to me, because I didn't grow up that way. But I think we're like the minority.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are still. And I am in the academic world where I'm interacting with people that are incredibly sex positive, and I still can't believe how small the world is. Of people who are willing to have an open discourse about this, to talk about pornography, to talk about masturbation, to talk about sex toys, talk about lube. I mean, these are all things that I think should be literally in the everyday vernacular, like what we're talking about when we're talking about health and diabetes and ways that we can prevent, illness. Like, listen, masturbation can literally prevent it. It boosts immunity. It makes your skin gorgeous. It helps with sleep. I mean, it's literally a preventative measure that we can take to upgrade our physical health too. So
exactly. And I think, it's super important for everybody. I always say, Joe and I, we have sex a lot just because it's very relaxing. I love to take a nap after. Of course, I don't like to do it after dinner. It's only in the morning. I don't like to be squeezed on a full stomach. And I think people don't make it a priority in their relationship. Is that true? What is it that happens in people's relationships before we get to the other stuff?
So I think what happens, like you nailed it, that people kind of, in the beginning of a relationship, usually it's like the 6 weeks to 6 months, all the hormones are flying, the dopamine and the oxytocin, like all the neurochemicals, the infatuation chemicals. And it's such a priority because it's such on the forefront of our minds. But then, life happens, and our jobs, and if you decide to take your relationship to the next level and you have the wedding to plan, and then it's the kids, and then the careers start taking off, and gradually speaking, it just starts notching down on the priority list. And what I think is problematic is that, although yes, of course, it's natural for sex to really start to diminish throughout the course of a relationship, just because of the other priorities that come about, it really does start to inhibit the connection between those two people. And when you don't take the time to kind of check in with each other physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and sexually, it really does create space for other things to take precedence, whether it's your job then becomes your mistress, or, if you're not connecting sexually and one partner wants it more than the other, it's natural for there to be a desire discrepancy. But, sometimes if you're not at least talking about it and addressing it, that's where you can really kind of open yourself up to other things and other people getting in the middle of your relationship. So, I think you nailed it when you said the priority becomes less weighted on the priority list.
Let me ask you, and this is about relationships. Do men and women have affairs for different reasons?
I believe so. In fact, I just listened to a great podcast on this, on mate selection, because I'm a big geek and I listen to, scientific podcasts about sex. But men, I think the general consensus is that men do favor variety, right? Which I don't think, this is maybe not a popular opinion, but humans are not really meant to be monogamous, right? So we do crave variety in a lot of different fashions. So men tend to look for variety, where women tend to kind of, they may have affairs to what they call partner switch, where like they're upgrading. Maybe the women have evolved emotionally or sexually or career-wise, and they're upgrading. Right. And so I think that's what happens a lot with why women tend to kind of look for, outside affairs, or they're not getting their emotional needs met. They're finding that men have maybe the men in their lives have become somewhat complacent. So, yeah, I think there are varied differences. And also, you have the whole midlife crisis thing that happens with men, though they start to really wish that they were younger. They start to yearn for those younger years, and they go through it vicariously through having a younger woman. So I think there are a lot of differences in why women.
I and people could recover from an affair.
Of course. Esther Perel made her entire career talking about recovering from infidelity and just understanding, making meaning of why it happened.
Yeah. All right.
Good. At the end.
Certain times you don't want to recover from it. You want to move on, but there's so many things you can recover from an affair. And I say that to people. It's not the worst thing. People make it out like you fucking murdered someone. It drives me crazy.
I do. It's what I say a lot to my clients. It's murder and infidelity are the things that we fear the most, or that we keep most in the closet. If you know someone who murdered someone, or know someone who had an affair, they're pretty much in the same social stratosphere in some people's eyes.
Forget it. That's the thing I get chastised about the most. I'm not allowed to have, I can't pass judgment on anyone. I can't say anything about anybody. She's a cheater. She did this. She did this. I can't talk about anybody else's relationship. Well, listen, I've done it all and been through it all, so I think I can say whatever I want. That's the way I say. I aired my dirty laundry.
That's right.
That's always my theory, Cate. So I want to talk, because you do a lot about porn literacy.
Yes.
Let's just discuss that.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm finally getting the PhD that my parents always wanted me to get, but I'm studying porn and how to use it as an educational tool. So I don't know how that really worked out for them, but I love it. Tell
everybody what defines porn literacy.
So I think when you say the word pornography, I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people get this idea that it's bad, it's shameful, people can be addicted to it, it causes problems in marriages, it causes erectile dysfunction if you're watching porn all the time. But what I really think has, fallen out of favor is the idea that whenever we have something new that kind of takes over the world, it's not about the thing itself. It's about not understanding the limitations of it, not understanding how to use it, not understanding, maybe kind of creating a product that is better for the consumer than anything else. Like look at what Mothers Against Drunk Driving did for drunk driving. We can't get rid of alcohol. Prohibition clearly didn't work. Mm-hmm. So we had to really understand and educate ourselves on how to use alcohol responsibly. So I'm kind of taking in my approach of teaching in my student groups, my parent groups, teaching it's not about porn. It's about how that porn is produced. Is it produced ethically? Are the performers treated fairly? Are they paid fairly? Are they even given credit so that they are getting known and are able to market themselves? How are the production companies operating? Are they operating with all safety measures in place? I know on movie sets nowadays, they have I forget the name of what the position is, but it's someone who's on set to make sure that consent is received and given, that bodily autonomy is maintained. Like I don't know that there's enough of that in the porn industry that's making sure that these girls aren't, and these guys aren't being exploited in some way. But there are ethical pornography production companies that are making sure that everyone's comfortable from beginning to end. And so I think if we start really looking at understanding what porn is and how it can really benefit people, it can benefit people that have kind of gotten into a rut in their sexual experiences with their partners. It can open you up to new types of fantasy. It can be, just a warm up to, getting people in the mood whether they're alone or with their partners. I even have a mentor who wrote a script for a pornographic sex education film that taught from a point of view, like a POV perspective, how to give a hand job, how to perform cunnilingus. I mean, there's an entire VR world of pornography that's being used for educational purposes. But because people don't have an understanding about how it could be beneficial and about the risks that, are inherent in the production of it and exploitation and things like that, I think people get it washes over all the potential benefits of it. So I'm really coming from a position of, wait, let's not just throw it all out. Let's really understand it so that we can kind of come from a position of really harnessing the power of it. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. I mean, there was more porn watched last year than I think traffic on Amazon, Google, and Facebook combined. So, I mean, if you think about the massive, kind of wind turbine that we could use to really propel sex education and propel, just our own understanding of our own sexuality, I think if we don't use it, we're really missing out on a great opportunity for education.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you.
Oh, for sure.
What did I tell one of my kids? I'm not going to say it, but
I was laughing so hard. He was actually going to Europe, and at the age where porn was very prevalent with him and his high school friends, we were literally like, do not be pulling those moves that you see
in porn.
No one wants that puss spanked like this. No one wants it like a nonstop spank.
No, unless they ask for it.
Yes, unless they ask for it. Yes.
Like, this is not a move that's going to get you some, especially not with girls in Europe. Let's
yes,
enough.
It was just, you know what, because sometimes how do you explain though, like to people, I don't think everything, you know, porn, I do feel is a little more fantasy sometimes than, yeah, you could pull some of those moves, but that's not the way regular people, I think, always have sex. Do you think so?
I think you're right. Believe me, there is a lot, and I'll go back to the ethical porn production companies, because they really do, you know, folks like Balesa House and Four Chambers and XO Afterglow, and these are companies that really try to take real sex, you know, there's actual clitoral stimulation, which, you know, only happens in mainstream porn maybe 30% of the time. You know, so there's warm up, there's lube that's being used, there's anticipation built. So I think, yeah, a lot of mainstream porn is, you know, wham bam thank you man, like a lot of slapping, a lot of like, you know, like tits getting slapped all over the place and nothing really.
Yeah,
it's very aggressive.
Like, I just feel like it's, you know, it's good for fantasy, but I like to explain that to younger people sometimes. It's just like, sometimes I think it takes out the intimacy, because I feel like, listen, sex could sometimes just be a physical thing, but if you're with a partner who's intimate, that's not always the way it is.
I agree.
Do you have to explain that sometimes?
All the time. And I think there's also this idea that even in like dominant sex or rough sex, where there are kind of, you know, even, okay, let's look even in the extreme of like BDSM. There are a lot of things within the BDSM kind of kink world that are not really well presented in mainstream porn. Like there's no discussion of negotiations of boundaries. There's no, you know, safe word discussions, like all these things that are very real parts of, you know, what would some people would say fringe type of like non-vanilla sex that aren't really even discussed or presented in mainstream porn. So even when you are talking about kind of the more kinky stuff that real sex can be, it's not being presented honestly in mainstream porn. So yeah, I do a lot of education about discussion of boundaries, and if you're going to do something more along the bondage or domination, like there has to be discussion of where your comfort levels are, what are your hard no's, what are the, you know, what are your maybes that I'll be, you know, willing to kind of talk about. But you're right, there's a lot of the missing in that discussion.
Yeah, I do feel that. And, you know, it is very interesting to me, because I've had, you know, girlfriends complain their husbands are so into porn. They think every, you know, sexual experience is like out of a porn movie. And I'm just like, you know.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think also, I mean, there isn't valuable sex education for young people that explains to them like the different levels of intimacy and the different levels of connection and boundaries. Because I feel like that's like there's so much. I feel like that's where the guilt and shame in sex stems from. Because you're young, you're trying to please someone, you don't know where your boundaries are, then you maybe go further than you would like, then it begins, you know, there's like a lot of gray area. And if we empowered young people to know all those things, we'd have way less issues.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no education around kind of that spectrum of consent that I hear you talking about. And, you know, just thinking about what you said earlier, Lexi, about the popular narrative is about what are we giving the guys? What are women giving the guys? The hand job, the blow job. We're giving up our virginity. We're doing all this to give. But there's not any discourse about how to receive and how to tell someone what we want. And I think that's a huge disservice to young women. And I think when I first started teaching in a high school that I was fortunate enough to have built a really great relationship with the administration at this high school, and they wanted to build a relationship and sexuality literacy program. So we were really kind of starting from freshman year, teaching these girls about, you know, the clitoris and about asking for what their sexual boundaries are, deciding what their sexual boundaries are, being able to articulate them, about, you know, how alcohol changes the way you perceive yourself, how drugs change the way you perceive yourself in the moment. So I was so grateful for that. And I think that's what really blew my mind up about, having to bring this to the larger adolescent realm across the country, because there is zero of that happening in sex education. And now I see it with my daughter, what she's learning at 12 years old. I'm like, okay, really? This is not what we really need to be talking about. She's like, Mom, do not call my health teacher. So,
exactly. That is the point. Tell us, a little bit about, which is the more serious subject with the trauma counseling, because I know that probably holds so many people back.
So it's interesting because when we talk about trauma, we can talk about such a broad range of experiences. I mean, I've worked with people that had just really visceral discomfort around, speaking of, we're around the holidays, when they were kids, being around kind of that weird uncle that just made them sit on their laps and, just had no respect for their personal boundary. And so there's that kind of trauma where it's more of an emotional impact that then can make them potentially just freeze up around men, or even just around, certain times of the year. If it's not around the whole year, but just around those times of the year, the body can have anniversary reactions. Amazing book called The Body Keeps the Score, that our bodies really hold memory. And if those memories are traumatic, it can absolutely create tension in the body. There's a vaginal condition called vaginismus, where your entire pelvic floor just seizes up. And that can be from years of just being emotionally and physically tight around the idea of sex. If you're constantly clenching, or if you're constantly just holding a lot of anxiety in your body, it might be really hard to just loosen up enough to kind of relax into arousal, or it's certainly to relax into an orgasm. So, it could manifest in something just as emotional tension all the way to actual vaginal tension. And it can come from a number of different areas. It can come from, religious shame, or just shame around being, slut shamed in high school, where that memory became so visceral and so traumatic that it just was held through all of these other experiences, that they can't actually relax enough into their emotional and sexual experience when they're in the moment.
That's so interesting.
It is, and it's so sad.
So many things affect people's sexual health, and sex is such a big part of life.
Oh, we are sexual beings from cradle to grave, and that's something that I think a lot of parents really have a hard time with understanding, that they shy away from talking to their kids about their bodies and about pleasure, and they shame their kids for exploring their genitals when they're 2, 3, 4 years old, which is totally appropriate. And even that experience, talk about what can impact you and create trauma, even just as young as 3 years old, being shamed or sent to your room for touching yourself, that gets stored. I mean, you might not have an actual memory of it, but your body certainly does. So it's so sad that people have so much shame around sex, because you're right, it's so integral to just your general well-being.
But and also about who the partners you pick, and all of that.
Yeah.
And the choices you make in life.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting. Let's just do some
some little scenarios. Oh, so
go ahead.
Busy at work, have kids, don't make time for each other, drift apart. What are some easy steps to reconnect sexually?
Great question. I am a huge fan of scheduling sex. Huge fan.
Do it.
And I think it's about bringing what we were talking about earlier of not making sex a priority. That if you start to think about the concept of scheduling sex, what are you going to do? You're going to schedule it for Saturday. Maybe on Thursday, you go get your nails done, you go get a pedicure, you start to kind of anticipate. And for me, what most people think of foreplay, like the touching and the rubbing, and that to me is all sex. The foreplay really is the anticipation. It's the thinking about it. It's the maybe texting, I'm so excited for our date on Saturday. Where do you want to go? Making the reservation, maybe coming up with a fun cocktail to have before you go out. You know, letting the kids know, mom and dad, you know, it's a good model for kids too, that you're showing them that you're prioritizing your relationship, and not just that they are the center of the world, but that you both are the center of each other's space, at least for that one night, if you can just put it aside for that one night. So I'm a huge fan of scheduled sex. Think of, and when we're first dating someone, all the anticipation,
yes, it's true,
right, comes from, oh, Friday night, I'm starting to think about it on Wednesday, right? Like I'm starting to get excited. And, you know, the desire is, everyone thinks it's a physical phenomenon, but it's a brain phenomenon. It starts up here. This between our ears is the most amazing sexual organ we have. And if we can harness that by just starting to think about it and really get geared up for it, it becomes kind of part of our everyday life if we allow it to.
Yes. Now, I mean, what's the average number of days a week people have sex? Couples, long-term couples. Is there something like, this is a common theme on my show? Well, I had sex this night. Well, I do this. And everyone's always arguing.
Right. So the average is like 52 times a year. So it's once a week, essentially.
Once a week.
Yeah. If you're having sex, I will say, if you're having sex under 10 times a year, that is, in my world, my people will say that that's kind of a sexless marriage. Even though you're having sex, it's only 10 times a year, and it potentially can start to get in the way of having, I'm sure you've heard the term, if you don't use it, you lose it. So, women can start to have a little bit more vaginal dryness if they're not having enough orgasms, or at least getting enough stimulation through the year. There's a lot of things that can happen if you're not at least having some sort of arousal and hopefully orgasm, although I don't think that should be the end goal every single time. But, like we were talking about before, it's about maintaining that connection. So about once a week is the average.
No, I agree. Like, it is about the connection, because something does get lost.
Definitely.
When you don't have that bond.
Yeah.
That sexual chemistry, that bond. Something's missing. It becomes just like your friend.
But it also is so easy to get into that place, because I remember when I was a single girl and running all over town having a good time, and my friends would be like, "Oh, I don't feel like having sex. Oh, he's gonna want it tonight." And I'd be like, "Oh, it's like going to the gym. You don't feel like going, but when you get there, you have a good time." But it is very easy once you have kids and your kids are in your bed, and that you just don't, like, then stuff gets in the way, and then you're annoyed with each other and you're not in the mood, and it just becomes like not a thing anymore.
Yeah. That's why I'm a big fan of what I call with my clients sex nibbles. That, and it does require some conversation on what exactly is a nibble. Because for me, a nibble might be, a 2-minute makeout, but for my partner, it might be, like getting naked, but not necessarily having penetrative sex, but like doing all the other stuff. I'm like, no, honey, that's not a nibble. That's like a full lunch.
Yes.
Not a snack.
If you can really incorporate like these nibbles, really determining, beforehand what it is for each of you, I think that at least kind of keeps the ball rolling a little bit. Because I think a lot of women have a hard time even allowing themselves to initiate like a makeout sesh, or, like even just a massage or a foot rub, because immediately they think, well, if I do anything, he's going to want to go the full way, right? He's going to want to get into bed. It's going to be a whole thing. It's going to be, all of this work that I have to do. And even the anticipation of having to do all of that work, so to speak, is keeping them from at least just having a nibble. But a nibble can just be a nibble. It can be just a makeout session. It could be just a foot massage or a hand massage, or even just a full, a back tickle. But sometimes it might lead to something else because you kind of get the juices flowing, and sometimes it won't. But at the very least, you're keeping the intimacy.
Yeah, I think the nibble. I'm about a nibble. I agree. A nibble's a good idea. Now, another scenario. Say if like one of the partners wants to do something sexually you're not into. Say one person wants anal and you don't, or something like that. I have girlfriends and men who are just like, they don't want to do certain things. Some men don't want to, perform kind of like this. I don't understand that, but certain things, and the women are just like, all right, fine, he doesn't eat my puss. Things happen, and what do you do in those scenarios? Do you have people come in like that?
I do, and I think a lot of it has to goes back to communication and negotiation. Because just because you may not want to perform cunnilingus on your partner doesn't mean that she can't do something in front of you that simulates that. Like there's a lot of clitoral suction toys available now that if he is involved in the act of doing that on her, using that toy on her, if he's involved in the act of actually, putting some lube on, there's these amazing, CBD kind of orgasm enhancing lubes where it smells amazing. They usually smell unbelievable. And the experience of applying that on her and using the suction tool, that is sometimes just as good, if not better at times, depending on, how skilled your partner is, that, he could participate in this and she gets the pleasure. Similarly with anal play, if you have a partner that really wants anal, but it is just not something that you're into, maybe there can be just some, outer stimulation of the rectum. There's a ton of nerve endings. It's an incredibly innervated part of our body. So it can be really, wonderful to just be willing to experiment with that. But then at the end of the day, if you're not into it, if you're not comfortable, that is it's a hard no, that has to be respected. Right. So I think it really does come out in the communication about it. I have Sex with Emily. Emily Morse is a really fantastic sex therapist. And she always says, like, communication is lubrication. So, I believe that. I subscribe to that a lot, that if you're not talking about sex, if you're not willing to kind of be vulnerable, at the end of the day, you're kind of doomed to have either none of it or really bad sex.
I agree with that. I agree. What about those people? What about someone just like wants a threesome? I know, and that's like if it's a hard no or whatever, but there's these people who get these crazy, Joe never wants a threesome, thank God, and I'm too lazy. I don't want anyone else in the room.
Well, it could just be also so problematic because it's always
how do you feel about threesomes? How do you feel about threesomes? What do you say about these things?
They can, I work with a lot of people on understanding their interest in it. Are you doing this because you think it's going to save your intimacy levels? Are you doing this because you think, or you're considering that, I should say, because you think it's going to bring the excitement back into the marriage? Because in both of those situations, it's probably going to fail miserably and it's going to cause a lot more issues than you were looking to solve. But if you're doing this because there is a really solid intimacy between the two of you and you're looking to explore, then I've helped a number of clients kind of open up their marriage, and not even just open it up like, oh, now they're part of this huge polycule and they're raising each other's kids. Like that's a lot of work. But like there's a bunch of different ways that you could even just like test it out. Cam girls, there's an entire world of online camming that can allow both of you to sit there and interact with a third person with no possibility of there being an actual relationship. So again, I think it goes back to, what are your motivations? What are you looking to get out of the experience? Is there one party that wants it more or not? And, in that case, I think it's definitely a time to kind of utilize the services of a sex therapist, someone that really is knowledgeable about polyamory and the swinging lifestyle, because there's a lot of considerations to kind of keep in mind and really explore before you take the leap. Right.
Wow. This was so
how much does trust come into how much does trust play into sex and people's relationship with sex?
150%. You are not going to have explosive, amazing on a consistent level, maybe like a one-off or, really hot and heavy affair when you don't really know the person enough to trust them. But if you want kind of a long life of really wonderful sex, there needs to be trust, 100%, which is, again, when I'm talking to young women about, their sexual experience and how they want to really kind of grow their understanding of themselves, a lot of it is about understanding what they're looking for, what their boundaries are, how well they can communicate them. Because if that person can't respect those boundaries, they don't listen to them, or they're not even curious about them, then that's like rule number one, obvious sign, red flags all over the place that this person isn't going to be able to be trusted. And in the basis of a lot of really amazing sexual experience is vulnerability. And if you don't trust someone, you can't really be vulnerable with them.
That's true. I agree with that. I have a lot of dear friends that are gay, and I guess it's not as common in hetero couples to be on Grindr or whatever it is. And, some people do open up their relationship, and, and some people are okay with it. Do you deal with gay couples? Are there different issues in gay couples than there are in hetero couples, or are we just all the fucking same?
I think there is, I've found, although I haven't really done a wide enough sample, but I've found in both my gay friends and in couples that I've worked with that are gay, there seems to be kind of an understanding that one person can't satisfy all sexual needs, right? There seems to be more of an understanding about that in the gay community.
There are, a lot of gay people are open-minded.
Yeah.
They're just more open-minded, more sexually free.
Right. And you have a lot of really traditional, kind of entrenched traditional puritanical values that you find much more often in heterosexual couples. So, it goes back to kind of old conditioning, always looking at what's your conditioning, what was your religious upbringing, what was your cultural upbringing, what are the expectations around sex. I do a ton of work when I'm working with new couples, just looking at family backgrounds, and they're like, wait, I thought I was here for sex therapy. I'm like, believe me, I'll get there, but we need to understand this first, because I need to know kind of the person that you developed into before you became sexual with another person. So I think you're right. I think there is just an openness to understanding that trust in this one partner that I have doesn't necessarily get obliterated when we add another couple into it. And I find that, people in the LGBTQ spectrum tend to be very good at communication.
Yes, I agree. Which is so interesting. And I don't know, do you think it's probably because the LGBTQ plus community has had to overcome so much, be forthright,
probably very introspective as well. They've had to probably a lot of self-awareness.
I agree with that. And the introspection is a good point, Lexi, because I think there's so many people that were forced to be closeted for so long, unless they were blessed with just a really open and accepting family, that it did force them to really kind of understand where their motivations were coming from with how they felt. And also, I mean, let's face it, the sad fact is that a lot of people in that community need to know how to self-advocate. They need to know how to really be their own best champion. And that is an incredible skill to have when you're in a sexual relationship. So I think there is a lot of crossover for that. You're right.
It's true. Well, fine. This was so good. This was
so
great.
Tailor our questions.
Yes. Go ahead.
So we have 3 questions that we ask usually do for entrepreneurs, but I think we could kind of tailor them,
modify them a little bit.
So we always ask people, like, what's the credit to their success? And we say, like, 50% delusion being a good thing, to determination is a good thing. What are the components to, like, the perfect sexual relationship?
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. Okay. So I would say probably equal parts passion, persistence, and curiosity.
Ooh.
I would say that's probably the magic mix.
I like that a lot. Curiosity.
I know, curiosity. I love it.
We change, right? I mean, we're exposed to new things. You guys hopefully have a little bit more knowledge after our conversation today. I know that.
Yes.
Always gathering new knowledge. So as our knowledge base changes and our interests change, we have to be willing to share that. But then we also need a partner who's going to be willing to be curious with us about it. So I think that's huge. Passion, of course, and persistence is sometimes it's hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just need to push through.
It's true. It's true. Yes. With all the holiday shopping, the exhaustion, the everything, you just got to make the date and make it a priority, which I agree. So
Exactly.
what was your, as you know, I always say, what's the big girl panty moment, but what was your, do you think your hardest thing to ever deal with in sex therapy? What is like your, frustration? What is your biggest, hardest thing to deal with being a sex therapist?
I don't think I will ever really get used to, and I think this is a good thing. I don't think I'll ever really get used to meeting a client and realizing for the first time that they've been, really horribly traumatized. And it doesn't matter what the actual trauma was, but if that trauma has impeded their ability to be their full self, it gets me every time. Like viscerally gets me, and I make those decisions every single time I step into my office, that there may be a moment that day where someone just tells me something that's just super, just that changed them forever. And so I think that's probably one of the hardest parts, is to kind of realize that this person may never have had up until this point the emotional, mental, and sexual life that they have, but damn it, I will make sure that I do everything I can to make it happen.
Oh, that's so sweet. You're so good.
That is great.
That is great.
And then we always ask people, what's their most entrepreneurial advice? So what's, I guess, the most real advice for someone's sexual self? Forget sex with someone else, for their sexual self.
Yeah. To feel confident, I guess, in their being, their sexual being.
Their own real sexual self.
I think it probably is very similar to the advice I would give someone kind of starting their own business, is it's okay not to know everything. I mean, it is okay to be underinformed, as long as you recognize that you may be underinformed, and you go to the right people and you seek out the right information, because I don't think any one of us really knows our full sexual promise until we start getting curious about it, right? So I think if you kind of can admit, I don't know everything, but you know what? I'm going to go and look for it. I'm going to go figure it out. I'm going to try it out. I'm not going to be afraid of this. Then you're going to get so much farther in your sexual development than people who are just not willing to be curious and are a little afraid of themselves.
I know. I want to digress 1 second. Yeah. Should partners tell each other about their fantasies?
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, that's an amazing question. Yes, I do. I do think they should. Because first of all, we're not mind readers. We're not mind readers. We can't possibly tell. What if you and Joe had a fantasy that was, really well suited for one another, and you never told each other? You'd never be able to talk about it. Now, setting and tone are important. I'm a big believer in not talking about sex in the bedroom, because it's an incredibly vulnerable space when you're in the midst of intimacy, to bring up something that could be potentially upsetting or uncomfortable. So I'm definitely a big believer in having discussions about your fantasies, or really about anything about sex, outside of the bedroom. Like, hey, this is something I was thinking about that,
this isn't me, because I'm dead serious. I don't think about Brad Pitt, but somebody could be thinking they're banging bad Brad Pitt. I don't think they should tell their husband that. Should they?
Oh, so you're talking about actually, it's fun fact. People, I think, what was the stat?
I don't think about Brad Pitt.
70% of people have fantasies about other people while they're having sex with their partner.
No, I believe it.
Yeah,
I believe it. I focus on staying in the moment, but sometimes Joe goes, "What are you thinking about?" I'm like, "Oh my God, we got to go food shopping."
That's
like in the beginning, because he's like massaging me. I'm like, "Oh my God," he's like, "Marge," that's like when we're first getting into it.
Thinking about the laundry? I don't think you want to know about that.
No, I don't want to. Yeah.
My understanding of your question was if you're interested in trying something else out.
No. I say everything I want to try.
Oh, no.
No, but if you're, like your crazy thoughts, maybe you shouldn't share everything.
I think it really depends on your partner. My partner and I will literally, there is no holds barred. We tell each other everything. We tell each other who we think is hot. We talk about it all, but I'm an outlier, I think. But a lot of people can get a little bit uncomfortable. The trust thing, right? It's kind of the same idea of not really wanting to have a threesome, because you're afraid that all of a sudden your partner is gonna, if they want to sleep with Brad Pitt, that all of a sudden they're going to go and find Brad Pitt, which is highly unlikely, but
highly unlikely.
I think it's, it can be really intimidating to a partner to think that
you never
know. I've always wanted to ask a professional's opinion on this particular character. So obviously Sex and the City was like my favorite, loved it so much. How do you feel about this Samantha Jones character and the sexual relationships that she portrayed with herself, the way she navigated the sexual landscape? How do you feel about that? Was it sex positive or?
So it's funny because when I was watching it as, I guess I was in college at the time, I thought she was amazing. I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. She's really embraced her sexuality. She doesn't care what people think. And going back and watching it as an adult and as someone who understands, the difference between feeling desirable and feeling like sexy in your own skin and seeking the male gaze, I think there's a little bit of tension there. Like now I look at it and I'm like, okay, was she just seeking the male gaze as a way to kind of make herself feel like a person, feel like she had purpose? Or was she doing this because she really wanted to be sexy for herself? And I go back and forth. I think I'm a little nostalgic. Like I want to think that it was totally sex positive and that she was, an icon for female sexuality. But I go back and forth a little bit now that I'm looking at it through the eyes of, a 40-something-year-old woman who's had, a fair amount of experience in this field.
Same exact thing. It always fascinates me what like a professional opinion will be, because at the time, like, what a powerful woman. She didn't give a shit, but then it was like, wow, there was an element of like feeding her own insecurities, maybe.
Yes,
just wasn't like, it's always like,
it's
not real life,
I think that's with everybody though.
Yeah.
I think she's everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You're empowered, but everybody always has that little bit, right?
Yeah. Again, it goes back to conditioning. What have we been taught since, we were little? Oh, you're so pretty. Oh, you're going to have a boyfriend whenever you want. And it's so much conditioning that we just have to kind of be aware of. And if we're aware of it, then we can start to dismantle it a little bit.
Listen, I say it this way, and I hate just to talk about like men, but men have just so much balls. You could be like, and not to like shame men, but the most unattractive. They're so confident. You could be the biggest pork chop, snot hanging out of your nose, and they'll walk over to the hottest girl ever and think they have a chance. And I love that confidence. I'm like, go for it, but it's true, right?
It is. Yeah. Men are given, again, I feel like this potentially goes back to the element of girls giving to men. Men have a level of expectation when it comes to women. Like women don't walk up to a guy with the expectation of like, you're going to come home, you're going to eat my pussy, you're going to do it good.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
We're not raised to think that,
right?
I know.
Yes,
and men have the expectation no matter what they look like, whatever they have. I mean, either they have a big dick, a big wallet, or a big personality. I don't get it. You know what I mean? They think whatever and they're going to get it and they don't care and they're going to take it.
Exactly. Like, listen, guys, not every erection needs to be used. Okay. So like you can put one away once in a while.
Exactly. Tone it down, people. Well, this was magnificent.
This was
it was so
great. This was so informative, fun, important for people to listen to.
Yes.
And you have a great gift, a wee vibe, and tell everybody where they can find you.
So you can find me at Communicate, and Cayte is spelled Cayte because that's how I spell my name on Instagram, and my website is linked in my bio. So.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. She's amazing. Thank you, Cayte. She is amazing. She had the best advice.
She did.
What a great sex therapist. And I think everybody needs to talk about sex because it shouldn't be taboo.
It shouldn't, and there should be no guilt or shame around anything, any sexual feelings that you have.
No, I agree. And I think, sex is intimacy if you're with a partner. Sometimes it could just be sex if you're just having random sex or whatever it is, and that's okay. But it also could be, but you're with a partner, it's intimacy, it's vulnerability. I love all the things that she said. Make it a priority. I think that's important. Make a date.
Schedule it.
And that doesn't sound so sexy. It doesn't have to be spontaneous. It's the build up to it. I
like that, the build up. And I also like the sex nibbles, because that's, I think when people are like, oh God, my husband wants to have sex 4 times a week. That's a big, big commitment. I'm trying to watch Bravo. Those little nibbles, it sounds fun.
I know. Listen, I'm all about a nibble.
All about a nibble.
Listen, I'm always nibbling.
I'm a nibbler. Don't come in. I'm nibbling.
Don't come in. I'm nibbling. You know me. You know what? Because I make it a priority.
You do.
Because it's important.
You say, don't come over Sunday afternoon because I'm banging my husband.
Exactly. Or I say, don't. You know what I say? Go home early.
Go home early.
I kick you girls out. I said, go out.
My husband needs some attention.
Yes, and I think
that's a good thing.
It is. That's an important. I think people have to make their relationship a priority, because
I did love also that she said it's good modeling for your kids. I feel a little better about my parenting too, because
you should.
I never shamed someone I parent when they said that it's very relaxing to play with their little parts, and I said that's good for you. You should enjoy relaxing yourself and do it in your own time.
Yeah, you just do it in private. Relax yourself in private. And there's no taboo on masturbation. I mean, even on Housewives, people were like having a freak out. Cut me a break.
But that's a good thing. Like
don't shame your children.
Do it. Say do it in private. That's something just for you to enjoy.
Enjoy. It's a private moment. I mean, yeah. If you say masturbation's a bad thing, this podcast isn't for you.
No, we are sex positive.
Sex positive.
That's right.
Shaming negative.
That's right.
That's right. And I want everybody to follow Cayte at Communicate.
Follow
Cayte at Communicate.
Spelled Cayte.
Yes. And I just also want to say is that she's going to be sending a wee vibe to a lucky listener, and the winner. And I will call out all the contest details, what you have to do, and it will be sent to you
on Instagram.
We'll call it out on the gram. So follow us at The Real Margaret Josephs,
at The Life of Mrs. B, and Caviar Dreams Tuna Fish Budget on YouTube, everywhere you find new podcasts, Instagram. We're everywhere.
We're everywhere.
I have sex on the brain now. I can properly speak.
And have sex on the brain for the holidays. It's the best gift you could give, and it's free.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go home and have some sex with myself.
And it's free. Okay, happy holidays, everybody. Much love.
Keep banging.
Keep banging. Caviar Dreamers.